Great. Hi, everyone. I'm glad you could join us today. So I have two companies that I'm going to be introducing right now. So we'll first start off with AgVend. I'm going to minimize you, Raja, for 1 second. Sure. I'm very excited to be introducing Alexander Reichert, the co-founder and CEO of AgVend, the leading digital commerce platform in the agriculture industry. Alexander and I were actually in the same analyst class back in our Wall Street days, so it has been a real treat to cross paths with him again in this very new context. So Alexander, I'll let you take it away.
Great. Well, first of all, thank you for inviting me here and giving me the opportunity to share a little bit more about AgVend. And as Kristen mentioned, it was quite a great blast from the past there to reconnect with an old colleague. And so what I thought I'll do here, share my screen. Let's see if hopefully I don't screw this up. And hopefully you guys could see this. And Kristen, chime in if you can't, or if it needs to be minimized. But what I thought to do, I've been watching a few of these presentations, and I know it's getting a little bit late in the evening for some of you, especially in this global audience that we have, which is pretty great, and great that these visual tools, or I should say these video conferencing tools, can enable us to do that. But I thought to do something a little differently, and instead of going into kind of deeply into our products and our values, value props, I thought to start with just the founding story and our foundation, and where we started, what we got to, and where we are today. And then we can open it up to any questions and dive into any details that the group here may have. And so, like any good founding story, it started in a bar in north central Iowa back in the summer of 2017, early days of the summer of 2017. And I was there helping a few growers kind of finish up some field work. At the time, I was working as the VP of product for a company called Mavericks, which was in the aerial imagery and analytics precision ag space. It's been on there for about 7 months. And prior to that, I had been working for, not in the ag space at all. I was working at a company called Euclid, which was in the omni-channel and e-commerce analytics space, working with more traditional retailers like Best Buy and Home Depot and Gap and Nordstrom's. So there was a very big change that I went through going from that world and into agriculture. And so I spent the first 7 months on the job really just trying to understand production agriculture in the United States. And so a lot of that was spent with growers, with manufacturers, with retailers, just trying to soak it all up. And here we were in this bar, and it wasn't actually this cool bar because it didn't have a John Deere tractor in the middle of it, but I thought this picture was pretty cool. So, but we were in this bar in like I said, north central Iowa. And if you've ever been at a bar or in a bar in Iowa, there's a very good chance that you are drinking Busch Lights as the drink of choice by most farmers. I would say most farmers I know, at least in Iowa. And so we were drinking a few Busch Lights. And I was looking over at one of the growers next to me, and actually I was staying with him. And it was flipping between Amazon's app and Walmart's app. He was actually buying toilet paper. And I thought to myself, man, that's interesting. Here I am, a millennial in San Francisco, and I never thought twice to buy toilet paper on Amazon. And so that got us talking, and I said, how much of your household spend do you do online? And the grower said, well, it's about 80%. And I was like, 80%? That's insane. That's so much higher than the national average. Given my days at Euclid, I knew these stats right off the top of my head. I was like, man, that is a lot. And he said, well, it makes sense, right, Alexander? It's 45 minutes closest Walmart from here. For you can probably stand outside your door in San Francisco and toss a tennis ball to the closest Walgreens to get your toilet paper. And so that got me thinking. I was like, well, okay, well, if you do that in your consumer world, do you do that for your farm? How much of your ag inputs do you buy online? And he let out this roaring laugh, which I wish I encapsulated because it's become such a part of the company to date. But he let out this roaring laugh and he said, oh, young grasshopper. You have so much to learn in this industry. And he goes, there's no e-commerce in agriculture. And I kind of gave a chuckle and I was like, well, why not? There should be. And that was really the spark that I think eventually kind of created the flame that is AgVend today. And so over a few more beers, we talked around how he bought his inputs. And he told me that it consisted a lot of driving, spending, an average driving about 25 miles for in-person meetings to learn about new products or to review plans with his agronomists. It consisted of a lot of phone calls, up to 10 hours of calls, negotiating with his retailers and his salespeople at these retailers for his farm. And ultimately, it ended with physical invoices, paper checks, paper kind of overviews of fields and imagery data. And he was making these for him at the time, and still today, he makes his $1 million payments on physical checks. And he does these off the backs of physical invoices that, create stacks in his office. He writes a check and he delivers it down to the retailer. And what we found out was that this kind of experience wasn't rare. It was actually systemic across most growers in US ag. And so my co-founder and I, Ali Rosenberg, we decided to bring together a team of agricultural retailers and distributors and manufacturers, as well as some growers, and then people like myself who come from more of the e-commerce and the technology background, and say, how do we make this process of buying inputs, how do we make this easier for growers to do business? And I should mention here is that this isn't downstream, this is upstream commerce. So downstream commerce in the sense of a grower harvests his field and then sells his product. That's more downstream. We don't play in that world. We play in the upstream world. So this is growers saying, I need to make purchases for fertilizer, crop protection, seed, equipment, parts, feed, fuel, anything the growers really need for a successful harvest. All of that whole process was done in the way that I just kind of walked through in the preceding slides. And so that's really what we targeted. We targeted all the way from the manufacturer through the distributors, the retailers, down to the grower. And we thought about how to make it easier for growers to do business. And this is what I call the back of the napkin slide. Every good business, like starting in a bar, every good business should have a napkin at some point. And this is obviously much more done up than the napkin that we first scribbled this image on. But it was this idea of putting AgVend at the center and connecting suppliers with growers and doing so in a more digital fashion. And so our real goal was saying, hey, can we take technology and can we take a lot of the lessons we've learned in e-commerce, in other industries, and could we start to apply them here in agriculture? And could we do that to drive efficiency throughout the supply chain that should ultimately lead to lower costs of inputs for growers and a much better experience for them as well? And so that's really what we set out to do. This is more or less the map of our journey, and this is what we do today. And we do that through two different products. We have our initial product, which is AgVend's Marketplace. And you can think of this as very similar to a third-party Amazon-esque open marketplace where growers can go in, search for particular products, make purchases, etc. And we work with a network of third-party retailers that list inventory on this site. We conceal their brand before the purchase is made, and this is in order to offer the best possible pricing for growers. And for a lot of the customers that we see on the marketplace, they're typically more of we call it transactional grower. They typically don't require the additional value-added services of the retailers, and they're really looking for just the most competitive price on product. And so that's the AgVend Marketplace. And really that had been our bread and butter up until this year. And it still is definitely a weapon in our arsenal, but what we started noticing, and we heard it from our retailers, we also heard it from our growers that were buying on the marketplace. They were saying, listen, this is great. I love this experience, but I do most of my business still with, these two retailers, and I'm going to continue to do it because, Joe scouts my fields and Steve, has been working with my family for the past 30 years, and I'm not going to do business with them. But I would like to do business in a more digital way. And so that really gave us the impetus behind starting and building out what we call our white labeled solution, the Grower Portal. And so you can think of the Grower Portal as being a highly specified and specific I should say, specified and sophisticated, enterprise level Shopify-esque for ag. And so retailers, ag retailers, can come in here. They can configure the look and feel. They add their logo. They can, they have an app that lives on Google Play Store, the Apple App Store. And growers can come in, they can download that information. They really feel and they think that they're doing business, and they are doing business directly with that retailer that they're working with. And a lot of what we do, we take an integrated approach to digital commerce. And that's really kind of a key part of the grower portal, is that we don't want growers who are working with retailers to have a different experience when they open the retailer's app to if they walked into the retailer's location or if they were on the phone with the sales agronomist. What we want is a seamless experience for that grower as he moves or she moves through those multiple different mediums, multiple different channels, which is what the definition of omnichannel, what an omnichannel experience is all about. And so in a lot of ways, we are crafting that for our retail partners. I should also mention, though, that our grower portal has also extended into what we call a customer portal. So we work with some of the largest manufacturers and distributors who want to manage their dealer relationships. So again, I mentioned that we wanted to go all the way up throughout the supply chain to drive efficiency. We started with grower retailer, but now we are working between distributors and retailers, or manufacturers and distributors, or manufacturers direct to retail, and creating the digital commerce tools necessary to make those transactions a heck of a lot more efficient and create a much better experience for the ones that are using these digital tools. And so from those humble beginnings in that bar in Thompson, Iowa, we now have over 80 partners and do business in all 48 states. We have our sights set on Canada. Hopefully this year we'll be launching up there as well. And what we do today is really power that omni-channel experience that I spoke about, that omni-channel experience for some of the nation's largest retailers, some of the basic manufacturers, and the distributors that are out there across the US. We have 2 office locations, one in Minneapolis and the other in the Bay Area. We are a relatively distributed team across the country, given the fact that we are small, still a very small team, but have scaled quite widely geographically. So this, with COVID-19, we were actually well positioned to handle not having the office be open. So that's been an interesting blessing in disguise. And that's really, that's pretty much it. That's the story. And so I want to thank you guys again for having me in here. We always are looking for individuals who want to join our team or who want to partner with us, companies who want to partner with us, as long as you share the vision that technology can be used to create efficiency within the supply chain that will ultimately drive better costs for growers and a better experience for growers. We're open to having those conversations. So my email is there, alexander@agvend.com. You can also reach out on LinkedIn or Twitter. My team always jokes my Twitter handle is Reichert Tweets, but really I don't tweet that much. So it really should be Reichert Rarely Tweets or Reichert Sometimes Tweets, but it's at Reichert Tweets. And I'd be happy to field any questions that you have now. Or again, if you want to reach out and connect directly, please feel free to grab my email here and follow up after this call.
Right, awesome. Thank you, Alexander. I think we have time for 1 or 2 super quick questions. So we do have some audience questions, and I think this one we can kind of combine. What has been the response by larger retailers, and how do you compare your value proposition to other startups looking to do direct to farmer?
With larger retailers, we work with the nation's largest retailers. We have partnership agreements with 4 of the top 8 largest ag retailers in the United States. We power that technology that they use to go to growers and create that digital experience with growers. So we're very close partners with retailers and, as I said, distributors and manufacturers as well. And then, sorry, the second part of that question was around. Oh, Kristen, I think you're muted there. Sorry, couldn't hear you there. I think Kristen may still be muted.
Oh, I had it muted. It was, how do you compare your value proposition to other startups trying to do direct to farmer?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, I think the number one thing that we always say around the office is we create efficiencies, not redundancies, right? So, I think there is we've taken the ag distribution chain, we've analyzed it, and we said where are the areas that we can actually provide digital tooling that could create those, really kind of massive levels of efficiency gains. And I think someone actually, said, "I can't believe this hasn't been done before. It's shocking." It was shocking when we started to kind of pull back the layers here. It was the fact that this just software had not been utilized in a way to create that relationship between retailers and growers. And so, I think the one thing AgVend does is look at, like I said, the existing supply chain and create those efficiencies, not try to create redundancies by going around the retailer or going around the distributors. And we see that there's a lot of efficiency that can be gained by just optimizing the process that which products are sold.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Alexander. Really appreciate you taking the time to come talk with us today. We're going to pull up our other speaker onto the screen now. Thank you so much.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
Hey, so here we have Raja Ramachandran, who is the founder of Reichert, a company that is creating the blockchain of food to address issues across the food supply chain. Raja comes from the world of finance, where he was most recently a managing director and on the founding team at R3CEV.
Thanks, Kristen, and appreciate being invited to this. And I know it's late for some of you folks globally, but we'll try to be brief and hopefully informative. Raja Ramachandran, co-founder and CEO of Ripe.io. And, in essence, this long-term strategy is to help answer that question, to know about your food. And so we've been at this for about 3 years. We've gone through kind of a cycle where we've evaluated the supply chains, the food supply chains from restaurants, consumer products, good companies, distribution companies, animal science entities. And so, through all of that, we've learned that a blockchain could actually be, or at least distributed ledgers could be a good way to ultimately create a shared system of record where you now have one item that everyone has a consensus on. And let me go through some examples of it. I'm going to bring up my slide deck. Let's see. That's interesting. Give me 1 second. It's not allowing me to share this.
Hey, Raja, I can pull up. Oh, never mind. You got it.
I think it's okay. Let me, are you seeing my screen or?
Yeah, I see it. Looks great.
Interesting. So it's got multiple views of me. So that's not so good. I think maybe just for time's sake, it might be useful if you could post it, because I don't know why it's doing.
Sure, I have yours open actually, so I can just pull it up right now.
Yeah, okay, that'd be great. And I guess you're gonna want to minimize me, I guess, or how's that gonna work? So, Kristen, do you?
Yep, you should be good. Sorry.
Oh, no problem. Great. And do you want to do it in the sort of a slide share mode, or see if that works? Okay, great. Not quite seeing it, but I've seen enough of it to know. So if you could go to the next slide, please. Sorry about this. Yeah. So we are creating a new type of transparency network so that we can tell the story of food, that we can identify, lack of efficiency, and bring together shared data so that you can create one more robust record of any type of produce type. And so it's a network that we're actually creating along those lines. And then if you go to the next slide, please. So this is kind of the food supply chain. It is it's remarkable in the sense that, every day we get food, and for the most part, it's safe. But, there's an enormous amount of fragmentation and silos. And so in the end, it's creating more pressure around things and problems like food waste, food safety issues, recalls, Certainly not understanding what I'm being invoiced and is it authentic, and all these issues that you're hearing about. And the consumers want to know what this is all about. And so we actually have created this network so any of these entities can effectively set up their own, their own supply chain and be connected to others through a shared ledger. And so if you could get to the next slide. And Kristen, I don't know if it's showing that it's being cut off a little bit. Could be.
I do see it's being cut off. I'm just going to try to maximize it.
Maximize it. Okay. Yeah. Sorry about that.
Apologies.
No, I should have tested out why that didn't share. So what does our platform do? This is a simple subset of how ledgers connect to not only the actors and the participants, but rather how do you connect them so you can create a consent record. And so this one is a simple example of one of our customers that basically connects their, say, animal genomics, which tells you a lot about, the predictability of the performance of an animal, for example. And so it connects to the processor data, which then is shared with distributors and restaurants. And ultimately, that's a simple use case of how does this platform work. And so we didn't do the normal blockchain, a bunch of arrows, and you create a distributed network. But in essence, this is kind of what our platform does. If you go to the next slide. And so ultimately, we're trying to create this opportunity where we're creating effectively the shared system of records so that you have an opportunity to see everything in one shot. And so, Kristen, we could just stick with this and, hopefully we can always share it. If you could get to the next slide. So this is a little bit more detail about how this actually works. So our platform, has a data capture mechanism. It has a data transformation mechanism. It gets injected into the blockchain and hashed as a record. And ultimately that record is shared amongst the group. So you can, over time, figure out, do I have garbage in, garbage out problems? And do I have a consent record that ultimately is showcased? So this is a live example that we're actually going through right now with the National Pork Board. And so what the goal is for this large burger franchise is to get assurance that the housing of the sows, are open. And so they want to know from the producer through the processor that this was fulfilled. So you're getting assurance that fulfills procurement requirements. And so the way this is set up is that we've got a data library that we call the food library. And then what that does is there are attributes that are associated, with the underlying product. In this case, a pig or hog. And so that food library is what you're seeing. It contains not only the data, but also the events that can occur. So in this instance, you're seeing DNA data, you're seeing housing data, what's their diet, what kind of medical records are we able to go ahead and place together, how sustainable is it, and so on. And so all of that information gets captured, placed on ledgers for each of the different participants. And I know this is a little small, but these are sort of, our product dashboards. So in essence, think of us as kind of like a Salesforce.com, where in essence, you have all of this information that is permission for the particular ledger set or the group that's meant to see it. And you're able to get some great insight in terms of all of those different records that we just showed. You can look at your breeding history, you can look at, processing information, you can look at health and quality maintenance. And so in essence, it reinforces to the buyer or the participants, did this actually occur? And that's the core of what we do. I'll give you another example. If we can go to the next slide, Kristen. This is more of the same thing. It probably is not quite as clear, but again, this is a sample of kind of like how our users would go through something like that. And then in this slide, you're actually seeing a demonstration, of what, well, so yeah. So anyway, going back to this screen, what you're seeing in both sides is not only the traceability, the provenance and the travel path on the upper right side, but we also capture a lot of information that come from live conditions monitoring, whether there are sensors, clouds, whatever it might be. And then we use our technology to assemble all of that data in a timestamp sequence, so you can create a true logical record on a blockchain for the whole thing. And so we're a B2B company, but like the next slide shows you how, you know, you could, like, we did some work with the Dairy Farmers of America. And so what they wanted to show some of their like customers is, number one, you know, sustainable approaches to the to their milk. They wanted to prove that it comes from local sources, that they have a sustainability calculator, and that's in essence an index on things like, well, what's the equivalent of a car ride? And then so this is a piece where you can actually, you as a consumer can click on a QR code. And I think I've heard some other you know, presentations talk about the same. And it's all a function of what information do you want to display. And so this is an app that would be managed by the brand and the aggregator of the consumer, whether it's a grocery store, a large consumer products goods company, or even the dairy farmers. And then one other piece that I thought could be kind of interesting is, if you could go to the next slide. So we've been doing a lot of work with Sweetgreen. I think many of you probably recognize them as a really really innovative, you know, very committed to regenerative farming and sustainable farming. And they're a great restaurant in many urban cities around the country. And so, you know, because we capture the data, throw it on the blockchain, you know, in the end, we allow the folks who actually know their consumers to tell that story. And so what they've done here is we've been tracking, you know, a particular type of beet. And so what they've done is created the story about, well, how do you get that flavor? And we've been doing a ton of work with them to actually do prediction of flavor. And we do have an algorithm against it. And so here they're telling those stories. So when you see, you know, 23 years since the Badger Flame beet, you know, was assigned, or 80 days from seed to maturity, we also track with this farmer a particular sensor in the soil. So it gives us a ton of information about things like soil temperature, NPK, moisture levels, carbon, etc. And then ultimately they're like, well, why does it taste the way it does? And we've been working with the University of Wisconsin that helped us identify the chemical, this thing called geosmin, that actually gives you that earthy flavor. So we would never know, we wouldn't know how to tell that story, but our customers do, because, you know, the Sweetgreen customer is kind of like ground zero for millennials. And this is the type of information that they, you know, I guess they feel is important. And so it gives them real intimacy to the customer, you know, ultimately. And then in terms of, I think, let's see the next slide. You know, and so these are sort of, you know, our customers, and then what are really, you know, the values and the proposition around it. So it depends on where you sit on the network. The pork board, for example, they represent all the producers in the country. And so more and more, their buyers are looking for assurance that these elements are happening, whether it's sustainability, availability, you know, humane processing, and so on. Neogen's actually, they do DNA tracking, and they also have a number of food safety tests as well. And so, and they are also one of the largest genotype databases and phenotype for cattle and pigs and so on. And so we're able to actually work with them to do predictions and authenticity. And then with a large CPG, they're looking at efficiency. And so the real key value drivers are ROI. You know, how do I make this more efficient? How do I assure that these events are actually happening? That's what blockchain ultimately helps with. Simplification. What we found out from our farmers, you know, when you talk about digitization, their eyes roll over. Like in the end, what they really need to know is this making my life simpler? Because if you're asking me to put in the data, you know, what am I getting out of it? And so we've worked with a number of, you know, like core farmers in fruits, vegetables, proteins, you know, like citrus fruit. And we've actually helped re-engineer how they actually harvest, how they actually, you know, manage loads coming in from multiple labor sites, crop rows, and so on. And they see that you can actually create a digital map of how that gets done, and they can improve procedures. So people do ask us, what's the value for farmers? It's that, and also seeing upstream what's actually happening. And so in that last slide, as you can tell, you know, Sweetgreen's sharing that data with the farmers, so they know when they create something, it's connected that way. And so with that, I would like to end, and I think maybe there's some time for some questions, and hopefully this explained what we do.
Okay, great. Thanks, Raja. I think we have time for one quick question before we have to wrap up and move to the next panel. But we have a question. Are there certain types of products in which you see there's higher potential to apply your technology if you categorize them by meats, fruits, or CPG, for example?
It really depends. I think that in the end, what outcome are you trying to achieve? So, if you're looking to track the individual tomato, that's not going to happen. You want to track an individual cow? Sure. So then you want to understand, well, what am I trying to get out of it? Am I in a recall outcome? Do I want to be more efficient about that? Do I want to audit it? Or do I want to know how I'm pricing and what is the supply chain actually doing? Or if we're examining a particular area on things like food waste, how is it that we can isolate it? And so this length of data record will actually showcase and identify where some of these fissures ultimately are. And so in the end, it's one of those things, it's all about the outcome that you're looking for. So our dashboards help you isolate sort of the interpretation of those type of things. And we've just started, I guess, playing around with a little bit of AI and machine learning so we can get better interpretive results.
Okay, great. Raja, really appreciate you taking the time, really interesting stuff. Thank you so much, and we'll see you guys in the next broadcast.
Excellent. Thank you so much, and thanks to the audience for listening. Bye now.
Thank you. Bye.